Hi there. Welcome again to another episode of the Victor Cho Podcast. I am incredibly excited and very honored to be interviewing Mr. Amandeep Gill, who has many, many titles, and many of them are long, but his core role today is the Undersecretary General and Special Envoy, Digital and Emerging Tech at the United Nations. He, of course, has had a long and storied career, including being project director, CEO of IDARE, the International Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence Research Collaboration. He has been executive director of the United Nations for many, many years. Many things before that, and which we probably don't have time to go into, but just an amazing soul. I had the honor of meeting him through one of my co-founders, Digvijay Chauhan, and what I was immediately struck with upon meeting him was, here is someone who really understands technology at a visceral level, at a very technical level, and is now bringing that expertise literally to the world, the United Nations, to help improve condition. So, Mr. Gill, such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Victor. Thank you for the warm introduction.
No, of course. So sadly, this is a fairly short podcast. I could literally spend hours, I'm sure, in discussions. But maybe just as a starting point, would love to just have you describe your role at the UN and some of the key work that you are driving there. Maybe as a starting point for the conversation.
So the United Nations is a complex, wide-ranging organization. And we use technology across the board, across our three pillars: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. But we also bring the world together. So 193 countries and different stakeholders within those countries come together at the UN to pursue a number of areas of interest to them: peace and security, sustainable development, environment, and many more. So in recent years, technology has become a subject in these discussions. So my role is to help governments come together to discuss the policy aspects of technology, especially emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. My role is also to advise the senior leadership of the UN, including the Secretary General, on what's going on. What are the tech trends? Yeah. What do they mean for our work? So it's a strategic role, bringing the world together to cooperate on technology governance, bringing the world together to harness technology for good, and also to support the leadership of the UN in engaging with the rest of the world on these issues.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And just for my own basic edification, I'm super curious. What is the mechanism within those countries for the influence to propagate? Are there technology leads in those countries who are responsible for kind of coming together, and then it distributes? Does it vary? Like, what is the human capital mechanism for spreading across the globe? Because it seems like such a daunting challenge on one hand. So I'm just curious as to the network dynamic that's at play.
I think you have the government ministries themselves. So that includes the offices of the presidents and the prime ministers, the leaders who govern these countries. These days, more and more countries are interested at the leaders level in tech issues, in AI in particular. And then you have the competent ministries, the line ministries, whether it's foreign affairs on the diplomatic, geopolitical aspects of technology, or it is ministries of digital transformation, information technologies, who are concerned with infrastructure, with the economic upside, with some of the regulatory issues. And then, of course, there is the private sector and civil society organizations within these countries. So CEOs of prominent companies, for example, if you look at the US, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Anthropic, DeepMind, they often work with us at the C-suite level in terms of understanding what's going on at the multilateral level, also influencing it. So it's a two-way kind of a process, even as we, through the UN, reach out to these players reach out to us to try and understand what's going on and participate in it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm I'm curious, and I guess the answer might be that just it depends. But is there a country which is a prototype example in your mind of like this country has the best mechanism, whether it's through those organizations or through the CEOs, right, of rapid propagation? Because you guys are focused on such critical issues like AI governance and data protection. Is one model better, or is it really just very? I mean, every country is so different that it's just you got to make it work depending on what entities are in place.
The beauty of the UN is there's so much diversity in terms of who's represented at the UN and how they work. And we have to find ways to be as accessible to everyone as is possible. But in my mind, I find what I call smart powers. These are not necessarily the large countries with huge digital economies. Countries such as Singapore, UAE, or recently I was in Slovakia, where the leaders are interested, their ministers are interested, their diplomats are engaged on these issues, and they may have, a few companies that are at the cutting edge of either cybersecurity or AI, and they participate. They are interested in contributing to what we are doing. So there's no one model that's the perfect model. And part of my job is to exhort countries to be more active in technology discussions at the UN. Don't sit it out. Come and participate. You may think you don't have a tech ecosystem that's the equal of a US or a China, but it matters to your future. So do come and participate.
Yes, no, that makes a ton of sense. Well, what is I assume the hot topic across the world at this point is AI and all of the related and associated issues. What is the tenor of the global conversation, if it could be summarized at this point in time, or is it just still forming?
No, it's come a long way. So when this Secretary General Antonio Guterres started his first mandate in 2017, he underlined this issue of digital cooperation, of tackling AI's challenges, both opportunities and risks. And at that time, not many people were paying attention, and the conversation was moving in niche areas like lethal autonomous weapons, weapons that can take life and death decisions autonomously. But since then, we've come a long way, and there is let me put it this way, there are three main tracks along which people are engaging with AI. One is the applications and the opportunities for sustainable development, agriculture, health, education, productivity benefits across the economy. So people don't want to sit out this revolution. In Africa, for example, parts of Asia, Latin America, there is awareness that if we miss out on this, we'll miss out on huge dividends for the economy, for transforming our societies. The second track is on the risks. Risks not only of discrimination, exclusion, bias, deception, and misinformation, disinformation, but also rising inequality, fast and unpredictable shifts in the labor marketplace. So the category of risks and challenges is another track. And finally, I would say, there is a track in terms of how do we govern this globally. It's the institutional track, if you will. Do we need new mechanisms globally to come to grips with this? In the past, the UN has worked on nuclear technologies, space, many, many other areas where the world needed to come together because the power of the technology was enormous. So there we made great progress in the past couple of years. So just recently, the UN has launched two standing mechanisms, starting 2026, an international independent scientific panel on AI, and a global dialogue on AI governance, and a third institutional response in terms of capacity building on AI, so that countries around the world have equal opportunities to access it, to govern it. So that is also underway. So I would say, started with niche consideration, now it's broadened out, and it's moving on to some institutional standing responses to the challenges and opportunities of AI.
I'd love to drill a little bit into, because I know you did some amazing work around nuclear disarmament around the world, and there is. Maybe we'll end on the positive note of all of the positive impacts that AI can have, but I'll jump down into the risk side for a second. There is, of course, a group of people, and maybe rightly so, right, that are concerned that when this technology is applied by bad actors, right, it can become incredibly dangerous. So I would love to hear your thoughts on maybe the similarities between what happened with nuclear in terms of kind of global containment. What's happening now? Is it very similar? Do you think we'll end up in the same place? Is it different? If so, yeah, how do you or the UN think about that world?
I think there are some interesting analogies we can use for AI. But as with all analogies, reasoning by analogy has its limitations. Yeah. When it comes to nuclear, I think one lesson is that powerful technologies need governance. So the power of nuclear in terms of both the destructive side, but also in terms of, electricity, even, other application of nuclear energy, enormous power is there that can be harnessed for good. So I think that's an easy analogy. The power of science in terms of, how science can move applications and how scientists from around the world need to collaborate. You look at CERN in terms of, fundamental physics and, and so on. But I think from there to AI, we have to be careful because AI is not as discrete and as material as nuclear. It doesn't have clearly defined production pathways, unlike nuclear, where, either if you're getting to a nuclear weapon, it's either enriched uranium or separated plutonium. There's no third part. And there are discrete points of control. And then most of the technology is in government hands. So nuclear weapons program are not private programs. Yeah. AI is completely different, and the value chain of AI is very different. The number of people involved, the open source community. You can't imagine open source in the case of nuclear weapons. Yeah. So I think we should be careful in applying this analogy. I think one area where some people have found some analogies is in terms of existential risk, that nuclear weapons can literally destroy humanity or civilization as we know it, and they worry that AI could do likewise. We can debate that, whether that's possible or feasible. And then that you need, therefore, a kind of control that we've seen with nuclear energy, International Atomic Energy Agency, proliferation controls over, how much material and where and under seals, locks, and conditions. So people have mused about, done thought experiments about, can we control hardware in terms of training AI models, etc. So I think this is the kind of, but I'd be careful in just doing cut and paste in terms of nuclear and AI. It's at the end of the day, a general purpose technology. So like electricity, like the steam engine, or even glass. My glasses, for example, this is an augmentation of a human capability. And glass has been used in scientific research. The vaccines that we used during the COVID pandemic, they were in glass vials, using technologically engineered glass. We peer at the stars, we look down through a microscope. So glass is it is general purpose application. So, but do we control glass the way it is controlled? In the nuclear technologies controlled in the nuclear domain? I don't know. So,
to me, why? Yeah, I've lived through 3 of the big technology waves now, as have you. If you consider mobile, internet, PC, right? These have been fairly transformational technology waves. I think this one is so unique because, to your point, it is both a general purpose, innocuous, maybe highly beneficial technology on one hand, but I can't think of another general purpose technology that has as wide a spectrum of potential impact. in terms of the risk profile. Like if I put nuclear off to one side, it's like, yes, it's super dangerous, but it's also incredibly expensive, right? It's not something you can just do in your backyard. And so the fact that this technology is it's going across the entire, all the way from like a small LLM that can help you with some minute task to something, if it were unleashed in the wrong way, could do some damage. I think it's fairly unique from a technological impact range, from my
Absolutely.
perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that said, I like to kind of, highlight two areas, my personal favorites, in a sense, in terms of the analogy thinking. I think one is in the nuclear domain, we engineer for safety and security, and we budget for safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
So it's inbuilt in the minds of the designers, the regulators, etc. I think eventually in the AI space, we'll need to do that because today we are trying to pass on. I'm saying we, but at least some companies think they can pass on the costs of safety, security to other authorities. So it's a kind of a cop out. I don't think that's a good idea. The other thing is the scientific collaboration. So for the good users, at least, no single country could hope to put up something like CERN, for example. So countries need to come together, scientists need to come together. And I think those two are good analogies for us to be. And final thought on this one, Victor, is that we have to, as you said, this is a different revolution from the ones we've seen before. So if we are using the benchmarks of the past, then we are missing out on how close AI is to approximating human capacities.
Yes.
No other technology in the past has done
That's
this. They have this kind of a material aspect, but this one has a cognitive aspect, has a perceptual aspect, which is way beyond what we've seen in the past. And we are only at the beginning of this revolution.
I agree. As I go and kind of talk on this topic, I call it day one of 1,000 days. And if you think how far it's come in just a couple of years, the level of capacity that it has, I think it will be the largest technological impact to human behavior, which I know is hyperbole, but even as I go back and think of things like electricity or agriculture, I'm like, I think this will be bigger because if you extrapolate the lines of creating an intelligence that equals or surpasses and will surpass us in many different areas, right? It fundamentally changes this idea of what a human being is on the planet because we now have these new entities to interact with. So to me, it's one of the most exciting times, but one of the scariest times because if we get it wrong, if we put the wrong foundations in place, then we can do a horrible job as a species of reining in some of our technologies. So
absolutely.
Yeah. I would love to go to more of the positive side, which is this idea of these technologies uplifting areas like the global south, which I know is a key focus. Would love to hear more about, these positive dimensions, which I also agree are going to be some of the most transformative from a positive impact, education, continuing to move people out of poverty, etc. Would love to hear what the UN is doing there or how that's evolving.
So that's a very exciting prospect for us. If we get the governance right, and if we get the inclusion right, the positive side should not be only for a few people, or some demographics. We cannot leave, for example, women and girls behind, or some parts of the global south behind. So, but if we can get that right, then the opportunities are phenomenal, and we are very excited about them. In the UN, we speak of the Sustainable Development Goals, these 17 goals from zero hunger, no poverty, to how we manage the environment, the climate impact, and so on. So we believe there is a huge potential across the 17 SDGs to accelerate progress, and we are falling behind on the SDGs. So this is an imperative. Leveraging AI, leveraging other digital technologies to progress on the SDGs is imperative for us. Now, getting to more specific areas, like take agriculture, for example. So there is the age-old question of techniques that improve yields and that help farmers raise their incomes. So the problem of agriculture extension from experts to farmers. So we've seen a model of agriculture extension in the past. But today with AI, with Gen AI in particular, you can drop down costs of agriculture extension by at least tenfold. And you can reach farmers in their own language. And many farmers are unfortunately still not literate. They cannot engage with text, but they can engage with voice. That's for us. I mean, the work of organizations such as Digital Green in Kenya, Ethiopia, and India, using Gen AI tools to, train farmers and get them up to speed. Likewise, the potential of AI to bring data from ground-based sensors, moisture sensors, for example, plus drones and plus satellites, and provide in-time guidance to farmers on their devices. They may be feature phones, but their devices in terms of when to plant and how to plant, what fertilizer to apply. There's tremendous potential to improve agriculture productivity. And then further up the value chain, you have companies like AgNext, which is using machine vision, AI, and IoTs, Internet of Things, to assess the quality of the produce so that the farmers can get the best price. And the companies that are buying from them, they are assured of the quality of the produce. So, I could multiply the examples in fisheries. So tremendous.
Are those impacts already starting to ripple through some of these areas, or is it super early kind of testing phase?
Well, it is early for us at the UN, but I see on the ground in terms of what companies and civil society organizations are doing, things are moving along quite fast. At the UN, we have seen, some of the UN agencies like UNIDO or WFP, the World Food Program, already using AI, for example, to predict where there are going to be food shortages, food insecurity, so that we can pre-position humanitarian supplies. So we are looking at the early harvest, but I think what we need to do is focus on the strategic enabling, because being, as you were saying, it's more than a general purpose technology, because the potential applications are not imaginable fully. So then what do? You can't focus on specific solutions. You have to focus on the capacity to build solutions in context, in response to the problems that are of most interest to you. So I think that's been our approach. The Secretary General's recent report on innovative options to build AI capacity around the world puts the emphasis on critical enablers like a bare minimum of compute and data infrastructure, data sets that are critical for agriculture, public health, education, the talent, in particular the cross-domain talent that's needed, because you have to bridge agriculture and agricultural understanding, whether it's coming from farmers or agricultural experts, with the computer science and the AI expertise. So this cross-domain, pulling one of public health and AI, that talent in particular is very important, and the right policy frameworks. So we did an assessment. Around 60 countries have AI policies, and these are generic AI policies. And very few countries have reached down to the level of, let's say, playbooks for AI and agriculture, or specific requirements in terms of regulatory facilitation of AI applications in health, access to data, protection of data, etc. So from a very high level of, AI is good, to, how is AI good, and what areas and in what manner? I think that's our challenge for the coming years.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And the other challenge is the technology and capability changes so fast that whatever rule sets get put in, not that they become obsolete, because I think people can predict where it heads, but it does change so rapidly given the capability curve, right, that we're seeing.
Except that a few things will endure for longer.
Yeah.
That's like you'll still need data storage capacity. You'll still need data sets to
Yeah.
train whatever generation of AI is coming in. And you still need the talent, If
Yes.
good
Yes.
talent, it can iterate through technology development
Yeah.
cycle. But if you have nothing, then, you're just sitting and watching a high-speed train run past you.
Yeah. 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 That makes a ton of sense. How much, I'm curious, when I think about some of these, second, third world countries, and I think of the infrastructure that is evolving around AI, which is highly US and China centric, right, in terms of the core foundational models. How much of that is a discussion point? I'm curious. Like, is that okay? That's where the centricity lives, or will this create any kind of unexpected cultural, I don't know what the right term, islands, for lack of a better term, right? Like these models are being trained on very US centric or China centric, right, data sets. Like, does it matter because the AI is good enough to kind of extrapolate into these countries, or is that a concern at all?
It is a huge concern. So let's take infrastructure, for example.
Yeah.
All of Africa has less than 1% of the world's data center capacity. And less than 1,000 GPUs. Just a single university in China, Fudan University, has more than 1,300 GPUs. And, a single company in the US may have 250,000 GPUs. So you can see the AI divide. A big country like Ethiopia has, 12 GPUs, 100 million people.
That is insane. That is crazy.
So,
Wow.
they are trying very hard to, despite those limitations, they built a very nice set of, applications
Yeah.
with a 5 megawatt data center. So can you imagine what Ethiopia could do if it had access to more infrastructure?
Yes.
With 12 GPU, they can do so much. It's incredible. So that's one aspect. But then, what you said, the second part of your question is hugely important. Many people think that somehow, uh, leading LLMs by their very nature would work for everyone.
Yeah.
Don't worry, even if it's trained, 95% of the training data came from North America and Western Europe, or is in English. Don't worry, because, it's a world model. Everything is hacked.
Yeah.
So on.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Right.
I mean, sitting down with teams that have developed the leading Arabic language models in UAE and Saudi Arabia, I've learned that, they were frustrated because these LLMs coming out of US mostly, they could not handle the breadth of Arabic vocabulary, because the Arabic as a language has a lot of diverse vocabulary. So they had to, develop their own models that could be more culturally responsive. And then even when you fix some of the models for biases, the understanding of bias in different contexts is different. Like in India, for example, you have to think about bias on the basis of caste and not only class and religion and so on. So it makes sense for the world to have more diversity in terms of, language data sets, training data sets. And even if, you end up with, 5 to 10 leading large language models, makes sense for them to be assessed for language-specific, culture-specific benchmarks. So today, the problem is not only the absence of large data sets in many, many languages, including my mother tongue, Punjabi, but also the absence of benchmarks for assessing. I mean, a country like Slovakia, for example, we spoke of Slovakia earlier. There is a center there. So they decided, look, we don't have the resources to develop an LLM exclusively with Slovak language data sets. But we can do a couple of other things. We can develop benchmarks for the Slovak language and feed that back into the leading large language model companies so that they can improve their model. So this is, just an example of how we can ensure that the diversity of the world in terms of its needs, in terms of its cultural context, is reflected properly. The infrastructure issue, because you need money, you need resources for this. So our focus at the UN has been to encourage people to consider a global fund on AI. So $3 billion, which is, I would say, less than 1% of what the leading companies in the US are going to spend on infrastructure this year, so that we can have urgent investments in the 70 to 90 countries that risk sitting out the AI revolution. And this is not charity, because you're going to expand the total addressable market, if you will, in the future. So you create a broader base also for data sets and for talent, because talent develops with infrastructure. You can play around with things, and you can. So that's been a focus. And we are also advocating for a networked approach to AI capacity building. So different centers around the world can collaborate, because in some places you have a surfeit of compute. Compute cycles are lying idle. So can they be made available through protocols and secure means to researchers in geographies where compute is missing? So then you don't have to buy new compute, but you can use existing compute better by linking it up, by networking it, and making it available almost on a timeshare basis, like you do with timeshare in holiday homes or what have you. And when you're a good guest and you're leaving a place that you have stayed in, you leave something written behind in the register, saying, I tried to train this model and this is what I learned. And then the next person, learns from that. I think there are many, many benefits to this networked approach, collaborative approach to using infrastructure.
I think it's
saving electricity and, the environmental footprint.
I think it's such important work. Also, it's clear to me is, I think we see this just in our society over the last 50 years, right? We are accelerating the accretion of capital and wealth into smaller and smaller buckets. And AI, if we're not in a more networked model like this, I think it will just accelerate that acceleration, because, right, the countries with the capital and the means will get the capability, right? And it's just going to be a flywheel that continues to create imbalance. And so, kind of redistributing in very purposeful ways, kind of top down, I think is going to be so important to maintaining equality at the macro level in all areas. So incredible work. I know we're probably over time. So just last question for you, Mr. Gill. There's so much that's changing and it's so fast. How do you personally stay on top of all of this change? Or do you just absorb it as a function of your work, or do you have specific tips that you could give people of, no, I would be doing this if I wanted to stay abreast of the changing landscape?
Victor, I benefit a lot by visiting diverse geographies and sitting down with entrepreneurs, with startups, and established companies, and asking them about their work and, sharing with them what we are doing. So I think there's no substitute. I mean, you can read the best books, you can listen to nice podcasts, but when you actually go down and travel and, sit down with people in different contexts, you learn a lot. So my advice is, stay curious, meet with people who are actually building the tech. And that's not only a way to influence, them to adopt a more ethical, more inclusive, more trustworthy, safer approach, but also to learn from them what is actually, because often we've seen, policy making is so disconnected from what's happening on the ground that you come up with policy responses that make no sense. So I think my recommendation is to try and bridge that by spending more time with the builders, the designers, etc. I also learn a lot from experts, other experts in the field. This morning, we were having a discussion on AI deception. So leading researchers around the world. It was 1.5 hour, from Europe, UK, US, China, other places, talking about their research on AI deception. So that's and then, reading regularly. I've just finished Ed Convoy's book, The Material World, the 6 materials that shape our lives. Sometimes you kind of, look at AI as something that will take us into a world where material substances don't matter. And then you realize that, without sand and
that sounds
lithium,
fascinating.
you're not going anywhere. So I think staying grounded is important. And sometimes, just stepping, you can have a super focused approach to knowing about AI, but if you don't, step out of it and look at its transdisciplinary implications, you can again miss out on something that's important.
No, I think that's a great short list, and I love that book. Sounds fascinating. I will add that to my list because I do. I love those thought-provoking books that just break your world model and say, well, no, you have to think about it this way. And then it's like, oh my God, that makes such complete sense.
I would only say, one other thing that I try and do is look at things from an ontological, historical sense. When you're looking at chatbots, you take the book, Talk to Me, which is the history of chatbots, right up to the point where LLMs start. The Attention is All You Need paper 2017. So this book just stops there. If you read the book, then you say, oh no, the world didn't start in 2017 or 2022. It started a long way back. And then, you could go further back to the brazen head of Francis Bacon, or the C3PO kind of, analogy. So then you take things with a kind of, a little bit of a distance, and, you reflect on it from a kind of a historical angle, and then understanding how things work, like the elegant math behind machine learning, Anil Ananthaswamy's book, you realize, generating the next token is just trillions of mathematical calculations. It's not someone waving a magic wand. So I think, again, it's important to keep those historical and mathematical perspectives in mind.
Yes, those are great tips. I'll say, when I kind of looked deeper at like the tensor math, at what's driving these systems, what struck me was like, it's so simple at a high level, right? It is not something crazy. Like, you can understand it if you have that, any background in mathematics or statistics. So you'll be like, oh, I understand what this is doing, but then the output is so crazy, right? Which is it's one of the most amazing things that I think we've uncovered, innovated as a species.
Absolutely.
But Mr. Gill, thank you so much. This has been such a treat to have you, to have this discussion. I know you're super busy, so really appreciate the time and sharing some perspectives.
Thank you for having me, Victor. All the best with your podcast and with your work.
Thank you so much. In addition to running this podcast, I'm also the CEO of Emovid. In business today, it's impossible for anyone to tell what digital communication is real versus AI generated or modified. This is a huge issue that we have actually solved at Emovid. Emovid is the only guaranteed authentic asynchronous communication platform that has been built for business. If your business relies upon relationship and trust building, this is a must-have platform for you and your teams. Please check out emovid.com at emovid.com. Or even better, if you can see it, scan the QR code and you'll get to see the product in action and even get a special podcast offer. Thank you again for listening.